I'm Matt Guichard, and this is No Holds Barred. In today's session, we're going to talk about libel and slander, a case study. Some of you may recall we did a No Holds Barred session on libel and slander. But oftentimes I'm asked when something hits the news, what about this? What about that? And sure enough, recently we had a very famous person, Rudy Giuliani, who was accused of slandering somebody. And as a matter of fact, he had a verdict that seems kind of inconceivable of $148 million against him by two poll workers in Georgia. I want to talk about that case because people say, how could that happen? And what is libel and slander as it relates to a case like this, kind of a political case? And first of all, I want to say this isn't a political show, No Holds Barred. I don't care where you sit on the divide related to Rudy Giuliani, but it's an interesting case because I want to go back and talk about some of the issues we talked about, libel and slander, and then in particular, this case. So remember that libel and slander is a statement that is made that is knowingly false. So it's an untrue statement. And in today's world, it can be by text or email or telephone or publication or a news conference, which in this case, standing out in front of a bunch of cameras and saying that, in fact, I watched these two women sneaking in ballots in suitcases, tampering with voting machines, etc. So that's a real accusation. As a matter of fact, that's an accusation of committing a crime as well as being an untrue statement. And we call it slander per se when you accuse somebody of a crime. That raises it to even a higher level. And besides then knowingly making a statement that is false, publishing it. Publishing it means speaking it to somebody else. So if you were to say to a friend of yours, I think you're a crook, you're a liar, you're a cheat, that wouldn't be, the person would take offense, but that's not published. That's not stated to some outside person. That's simply saying your opinion to the person in particular. So it has to be published. It has to be sent in a text to somebody, published in a newspaper, put on a newscast, in some fashion published. And in this case, obviously, it was. And then the third prong, we used to call it the malice prong, that's done with malice. And in California, that's not actually the law. It can be malicious, it can be done with malice, but in effect, with the reckless disregard for the truth. So saying something in such a fashion, you really intend it to hurt that person. And it's a reckless disregard for the truth. So it can be written or spoken, as I've said, and oftentimes in today's world, we have to be very careful about sending emails. Perhaps you'll recall when I've mentioned many times that if you don't want somebody to see it, don't hit send. If you are drinking at night, you're thinking crazy thoughts, and you write something down in an email, wait till the next day to decide whether or not you want to send it. But in this case, we have all the issues. It was knowingly false. And let me say, there was no evidence to support the allegations that, in fact, they brought in ballots in suitcases and they tampered with voting machines. And I say there's no evidence because that was the standard that the judge looked at. And recall all of the lawsuits after the election in many states raising the same kinds of issues about fooling around with voting machines or throwing ballots away or anything like that. In every one of those cases were dismissed in every single case. And in every single one of those cases, what was important to understand is there was no evidence presented to support those allegations. So some people might say, well, in fact, I know what happened. You may know that it happened, but there's no evidence to support it. And in the Giuliani case, there was no evidence to support his allegation. He didn't have the evidence. So putting forward a defense to say, yes, I made those statements, but in fact it happened, and here's the video, and I can show you, or here's affidavits from people, or here are people who can say this is exactly what happened, and they took photos. No evidence to support it. So that is the knowingly false claim. And I want to say there is a distinction oftentimes when somebody says, it is my opinion, rather than this is what happened. And so that's a distinction on libel and slander we have to be very careful about. If it is simply somebody's opinion that I think the guy's a crook, I mean, I don't like his demeanor, I just think he's not an honest person. That is an opinion. That is perhaps stated as a fact, but it's opinion, and it's not a statement that's made knowingly false. And we hear all the time newspaper articles about somebody who used to be a president and is no longer is running again. He's a crook, in my opinion, he shouldn't win. Those are all opinions. That's not making a knowingly false statement, publishing it, doing it with reckless disregard or with malice. So then we want to focus on those two poll workers. So he accused them of a crime, and he did it a number of times. And the ironic thing is, when the jury was out in that case, Rudy Giuliani was out on the courthouse steps repeating the same allegations. And interestingly enough, the lawyers and the two poll workers are now thinking about filing another action. Now, I think we all know from reading the newspapers that Rudy Giuliani's hurting for finances. He's got a $148 million judgment against him once it's entered. I'm assuming the judge is going to lower that 148 because, frankly, it doesn't make sense, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But nevertheless, he has continued to double down on his statement, and in view of the fact the judge found it to be knowingly false, and he admitted that it was false at one point, he's got a difficult road to hoe. So he has stated it publicly a number of times, and as I say, on the courthouse steps. And then the idea of done with malice, or knowingly, recklessly making that statement. And really, in this case, it was done with malice. It was directed at those two individuals, accusing them of a crime. And in California, I just want to read a quick bit of jury instruction. It's always important, I want to say in our podcast, that we look to the actual law and the books. This isn't hyperbole or opinion. These are the facts. So in common interest privilege, the statement from the jury instruction 1723 of Cassie in California, that in making the statements, the defendant acted with hatred or ill will towards them, showing his willingness to vex, annoy, or injure, or that he had no reasonable grounds for believing the truth of those statements. So in a civil case in California, if we had libel and slander and the issue of malice came up, the jury would hear that. They would hear that jury instruction to vex and annoy, or knowingly to make the statement, knowing that there's nothing to support it. So very important to understand that. So the issue is damages then, and we go on to talk about if the two poll workers lived forever, would they earn $148 million? Is it anywhere within the realm? And I think that there we have a bit of a political thing, is that Rudy Giuliani and a verdict of $148 million it seems well beyond the realm of the damage. Now, keep in mind that those 2 poll workers had testified that they were threatened. People threatened to kill them. There were a number of things. So truly they suffered. They suffered damages which are obviously compensable. But I'm going to predict that the judge is going to reduce those, and it still will be an incredibly significant verdict in the millions. And a defense was put on. You can appeal all you want. The court found that it was knowingly stated, knowingly false, to vex or annoy. And there we have it, libel and slander. And so just with respect to that, I do want to say, if you are going to make statements about people that you dislike, and you're going to publish them, whether it's on email or however, ensure that they're true, or ensure that it's your opinion and you want to make it very clear that it's your opinion. I'm concerned about the vex or annoy. So the moral of the story is, don't do it, don't say it, don't publish it. I hope you've enjoyed this session of No Holds Barred, and I hope you find illuminating some of these issues that we're reading about here today in our society. So if you like this episode, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you at our next No Holds Barred.